morning, Rabotai. Welcome to Breakfast in the Class. Breakfast in the Class today is sponsored by Murray Dayan, dedicated loving memory Lunishmatim, his grandmother Fortunée Dayan Mazabat Adela Shalom, and his aunt Sheila Meir Zaslawer Sarah Bat Miriam. Also dedicated in celebration of the birth of their Bechor, whose Brit Milah will be on Tisha B'Av by Rachel, Mira, and Benedetto Mevorach Kalun. We're very much looking forward to the Brit Milah that we're going to have here in the Beit HaKnesset on Tisha B'Av. Also sponsored by Stephen Rapport, dedicated in honor of Soli Asif for all his work on the synagogue membership, and in honor of Haimi Chir for all his work transforming the patio. Chazak Baruch. Fantastic. Dedicated loving memory and Linu Shmat, Frida Bluma bat Shimshon Meir, Alei Shalom, and Chaya Sarah bat Aaron Yaakov, Alei Shalom, by Chaya and Shimi Deutscher. And dedicated loving memory of Yisachar Siman Tov, Alei Shalom, Linu Shmat Yisachar ben Tamar, sponsored by the Siman Tov family. Also dedicated loving memory of Sammy Siman Tov, Linu Shmat Sarah bat Nechama, sponsored by Nadine, Alec, and Simon Siman Tov. Dedicated in loving memory of Jeff's father, Joseph M. Sutton, Lunishmat Yosef Ben Sarah, sponsored by Rachel and Jeff Sutton. Sponsored also by Stephen Rapport, the Breakfast King, dedicated in honor of Jeff Sutton, in recognition for all the support he gives to various institutions throughout the world. Hazaku Baruch. In loving memory of Cham Eliyahu Levi, Lunishmat Cham Eliyahu Leon Ben Shakifa, sponsored by his son Hazan Shmuel Levi, and sponsored by Dorel Melul, dedicated in honor of his wife Oriya, in celebration of the birth of their baby girl Mazal Tov and Mabruk. In loving memory of Nishmat Baruch Ben Violet and Salim, sponsored by his daughter Vered George, and as well on the occasion of Rosh Chodesh Av from back then, L'Aslacha B'Kol Mikol Kol, for success and everything and blessings from all the congregation from Joel and Avi Oster. Sponsored by Emmanuel Zara, dedicated in honor of Rabbi Meir Freeman Shalita for his amazing job in teaching Torah and in being a shining light for our community. Also dedicating merit of her mother, Esther Bat Chai, that she has a successful medical procedure today by Suri Freund, and for a refuah shlema for Rabbani Chana Farchi, Chana Bat Sima Fega, and loving memory Lillian Lee Zabidi, Lilu Nishmat Leah Bat Jamila Yafa, sponsored by Jack Zabidi and family, and for refuah shlema Eliyahu Shimon Mazaf Fortunée, Rabbi Ilai Abadi, and the week of Kobu, sponsored by David Yash, in honor of you and your substantial capacity to good today and every day, and bananas and blueberries. Last but not least, we also want to wish Mabruk and Mazal Tov to Stanley and Jenny Chira on the birth of a baby boy, and as well to Ray and Cassie Chira on the birth of a baby boy. So Baruch Hashem, many, many beautiful babies, Hazaku Baruch, and that is all of the, That is all of the things here. I'm also planning for my next job, where I'm going to be an auctioneer, for selling used cars, so I'm getting lots of practice for that. I appreciate your indulgence, because when we're not doing the class every day, so the sponsorships build up from the days that we are not here. So Hazak Baruch for staying with us for all this time until we begin. Let's begin. And you shall know today and return to your heart, says the pasuk. Ki Adonai hu ha'Elohim, for God, He is our Master, our God. B'shamayim ma'al, in the heavens above, v'al ha'aretz mitahat en od, and on the earth below, en od, there is none other but Him. My friends, I want to perhaps try and bring out a very special idea, if I can. And the idea is really, it starts with the fact that there is a single midah, teaches us the Bet Yehiel. There's a single midah, a single characteristic, which is perhaps the most dangerous characteristic in one context, and perhaps the most amazing characteristic in another context. And that midah, that character trait, which is so beautiful in one place and so deadly in another, is the idea of sameach b'chelko, which means to be satisfied and to be happy with your lot. When a person is happy with their lot, when it comes to matters of a physical nature, there's nothing more beautiful in a person's life. When they're happy with how much money they have, when they're happy with the family that they have, when they're happy if they have girls instead of boys or boys instead of girls, and they don't sit pining over what they do not have. There's nothing that's more that drives a person's happiness vector in this life more than samech b'chilko. On the other hand, There is no more destructive feeling in a person's spiritual growth, in a person's own self-development, than the feeling of being happy with where I'm at. I have a mild anger problem. I'm happy where I'm at. I gamble a little. I'm happy where I'm at. I'm a slight alcoholic. I'm happy where I'm at. Could you imagine a more destructive feature than sameach bechelko when it comes to matters of the spirit, towards matters of self-development? So it is a fascinating insight that the issue here is a matter of figuring out where you put something. I'll just share with you an idea, perhaps that one could think about when you think about sameach bechelko. There is a wondrous cure, a wondrous drug, which is amazing, but is also horrible. And that drug is chemo. Chemotherapy is a platinum-based medicine whose method of cure is built on the fact that it is a destructive medicine that robs a person of all of their strength, wipes out sometimes their immune system, and yet, in the right way and in the right time, it is literally a lifesaver. My friends, this ability that a person has to be satisfied with what they're at, with where they're at and what they have, is, I believe, in many ways similar. Adjusted, administered properly, it will save your life. It will save your marriage. I'm not happy about this. I'm not happy about this. Yes, but what do you have? That's a great question to ask yourself. To save something, to build something. On the other hand, adopted or applied in the wrong way, it literally eats away at a person's potential growth. And there is one truism about Judaism and about self-development that cannot be understated, and that is that when it comes to matters such as these, if a person is not physically, practically growing, then they are drowning. And let me explain what that means. A person can maintain a bank account level that sits in a certain place. Although we know today that it's a falsehood because inflation is constantly eating away. In matters such as this, it doesn't really matter, so to speak, if a person maintains a status quo throughout their life. But the nature of what keeps a person healthy in the gym is the fact that they are straining. If they stop straining and they get to a place where an exercise is easy, the entire purpose of the exercise is lost. What makes an exercise healthy? The fact that it increases your heart rate. There comes a point where your heart is now used to that level of exercise. At that point, you are no longer exercising. You might be doing the same reps. You might be running as much, but you're not building. You're not your heart rate is not rising. In which case, you're not schwitzing. In which case, you're not getting the health benefits. Even though you're doing the same thing that once upon a time was very strenuous for you. There's a famous idea that we share. Please only answer Amen if you're listening to this live. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam she'akol nהיה baro. There's a famous idea that's expressed with regards to this point from our pasuk, because the pasuk says, "Ki Hashem hu Elokim," for Hashem is the God. "Vashamayim mima'al, v'al haaretz mitachat." En od. When a person is climbing on a ladder, so there are two directions that the person could look. They could look at the people. He could look at the people that are above him on the ladder and think, "Wow, I'm very low on the ladder." Or he could look at the people below him on the ladder and think, "Wow, look at how high I am on the ladder." Says the pasuk, "Bashamayim," when it comes to matters of heavenly nature, of a heavenly consistency, then where should they be looking? Mima'al, above them. Look at the people, the role models, the people that could mentor him, that could teach him to grow higher and higher and higher. Don't look down beneath you and say, you know what, it's great. If I come to shul once during the week, I'm coming to shul more than a guy that comes only on Shabbat. That it's true, you are, so to speak, going more than that person. But that builds complacency in a person. That builds sameach b'chelko in the wrong space in his life. The opposite, bashamayim mima'al. But al haaretz, when it comes to matters of an earthy comport, if it comes to matters of physicality, of creature comforts, of a salary, of a car that you drive, of an apartment or a house that you live in, then a person could look and see to themselves, you know what? There are homeless people. It's a beautiful apartment. It's more than what others have. In that place, a person b'bala aretz mitahat. Now, I want to share with you the words of the Ben Ish Chai. The Ben Ish Chai quotes a beautiful and a famous Gemara. The Gemara tells us, Le'olam yireh adam atzmo. A person should always see themselves ki'ilu, as if hetziav hayav, he is partially 50% in the red from his averot, his sins, v'chetziav zakai, and 50% in the black from his mitzvot, from his good deeds. Oseh mitzvah achat, if he does one mitzvah, machriya, he is machriya at akaf, he tilts the scale to the positive side. If he does one sin, he tilts the scale to the negative side. Now, if you think that this is not something which is of a real nature, then you have never seen a company that is owned 51% by somebody. It's only 1%. But that controlling majority means that they make every single decision. They don't get to make 51% of the decisions because they have 51% of the company. They get to make 100% of the decisions because they have 51% of the voting power in the company. My friends, Rambam says that the nature of a tzaddik is a person whose mitzvot outweigh his sins. And I'll ask you this question. When the Ben Ish Chai explains what the Gemara is saying, he's really asking this question. Is that naive to believe? What? You want to tell me that all of my mitzvot, all of my averot, that's what they add up to? They add up to 50-50? Is that really where I'm at? The Gemara tells you have to see yourself that way every day of your life. Says the Ben Ish Chai, genius. He says it does not mean that I am chetziav zakai, half positive, half negative. But rather, he says, it means if a person is coming lihityaesh, if he wants to give up, then what should he look at? The fact there's no place for you to give up. There's no place for you to be depressed. Because you know what? Chetziav zakai. All I need is one more mitzvah and I'll be in the positive state. If a person is looking, on the other hand, to become arrogant and to feel great about how good his mitzvot are, then what does he do? He looks at his half, chetziav, chayav. He looks at the fact that he has those sins. What keeps a person from falling into the trap of arrogance and complacency is by thinking to himself, you know what? Nobody's perfect. I've done many things wrong. What keeps a person from falling off the bandwagon and not throwing in the towel is the fact that he thinks to himself, Chetziav Zakai, but you know what? I have so many things that I am doing, so many things that I'm trying to do well. So it turns out that in this question of the glass, whether the glass is half full or half empty, the answer is not positive half full, negative half empty. Rather, it is in a constant state of both half full and half empty. And you focus on the half full when you're feeling terrible and you want to give up. And you focus on the half empty when you're thinking that you've done enough. That focus keeps you in a constant state, like they say, of perpetual motion. My friends, I want to end with this simple idea that I think is so important for our time now. You see, we learned this from the pasuk of Bashamayim Mimal Val Haaretz Mitahat. But I want to now replug in these words and this wisdom back into this entire pasuk. V'yadata hayom, and you shall know today, v'hashevota elevavecha, and return unto your heart, ki Hashem hu Elokim, that Hashem is God. Bashamayim mima'al, v'al haaretz mitachat enod. What is this pasuk telling me? What does it mean that I should know today and return to my heart that God is the only power? In the heavens above and in the earth below, enod, there's no one else. What is the pasuk communicating? I think the pasuk is telling us something very, very powerful. It's telling us, number one, if Hashem is God and enod, and there is no one but Him, and there is nothing but Him, then if you're thinking about the things that are missing from your life of a physical nature, understand for yourself one truth. If God wanted you to have something, what is there out there in the universe that could stop Him from giving it to you? You think the fact that you have a competitor could stop God from giving you $1 billion if He wanted to? Ki Hashem hu Elokim, b'shamayim ha'aretz enod. So if you're upset about what you don't have, think on this. If God wanted me to have it, what could stop Him? And if nothing could stop Him, that means that that's what He wants me to have. And if that's what God who loves me wants me to have, then that's what's best for me. You understand that in the pasuk? Now the flip side, Bashamayim mimal. But if I want to say to myself that, you know what, my level of spirituality is here, that's where I am, I'm happy, this is what God wanted me to have. Says the pasuk, V'yadata hayom v'hashevota elevavecha. What you're not realizing is something very simple. The human being has two parts that control his every move, thought, action, desire. One is his brain. Your brain decides logically what you think, where you want to go, what you want to achieve, what you think you're capable of achieving. But says the pasuk, V'hashevota elevavecha, there's another partner in that outlook, and that partner is where the heart is, the way that I feel. It is an absolute truth of our life that when your brain is telling you things, it is influenced by your heart. If you doubt this idea, if you don't think that this is true, think back to the last time you were in a terrible mood. How productive were you at work? If someone came to ask you a question for advice, what would you say to them? I can't think about this now. Why not? What does your heart have to do with your head? The answer is everything. Our feelings and the way we feel about ourselves govern also the way we think about ourselves. If you're feeling down about yourself, you don't think that you can do things. Even though there is no empirical evidence, even though there's no logical differentiation in you from today to yesterday. But scientifically, we can demonstrate this. When a person is feeling up, happy with themselves, what happens? They perform in a different way. So when a person is thinking about physical things, we're there, it's up to Borei Olam, because that's what God left this beracha to. It's up to Hashem. Parnasah, that key is in God's hands. Health, that key is in God's hands. You could have a guy who spends every day in the gym, right? He's buff. He could run 3 marathons, Ironman, and then he gets run over by a bus. This guy would never die, ever. And yet, on his way to the gym, he gets run over. Health, physicality, children, parnasah, those keys are in God's hands. But bashamayim ima'al. But when it comes to matters of spirit, in the same way that God made physicality completely in his hands, and we just go through the motions and God decides whether to bless us or not, that's called hishtadlut. In the same way that God made himself, left himself in charge of the physical realm and didn't allow us to be the driver of that success, so too in the reverse, when it comes to matters of spirit, is it exactly the opposite. God can't make you a Talmid Chacham. God can't make you a person with wonderful midot. God can't give you emunah. Like the pasuk, like the Mishnah says, Hakol bidei shamayim. Everything is in the hands of heaven. Chutz mirat shamayim. So now we're starting to see how these words in Bashamayim ima'al v'al ha'aretz mitachat fit into this pasuk. How do you think of yourself? How do you feel about yourself? Are you in a good mood? Do you see yourself in a positive light? Do you feel like you could do anything? If you feel that way about yourself, then, of course, Bashamayim ima'al. And if you feel terrible about yourself, then you know what? Al ha'aretz mitachat. The pasuk is encouraging us. It's telling us that when it comes to matters of gashmiut, it's up to God. So when you fail, how should you feel about yourself? The same way you felt about yourself yesterday. Because when something's not in your hands, is it your fault if you don't do well? How many guys do I know who don't date? And they'll tell you, you know what? I need to make more money. One part of that is being financially stable. But I believe they're lying to you if they don't tell you that when they're not bringing in the money, their male ego is bruised and they can't go on a date because they can't come across with the confidence that they need when they've had a bad month or a bad year or whatever. My friends, if it's not up to you, why should you feel bad? If you're giving it your all, why should you feel bad? The pasuk begins and tells us, I'm talking to your head and I'm talking to your heart. When it comes to things out of your control, don't let your inability to achieve make you feel any less about yourself. There are people who are brilliant and hardworking and they never had mazal. If they could not push themselves harder, what should they expect from themselves? And why should they feel worse about themselves for that? On the other hand, people flip when they should be sameach bechelko. Listen, I can't learn Torah. I have ADD. I'm not so smart. Ironically, they have this false sense of pride when it comes to physical things, and all of a sudden it comes to spiritual things and they're anav. The crazy thing is that when it comes to matters of spirituality and it's all in your hands, in matters of spirit, our failures are our own. And in matters of physicality, our failures do not belong to us. And yet, somehow we flip that script and see it backwards. Put your effort in. Do everything you can. Decide to yourself that no matter what comes, you're going to choose which half of the glass you look at when. You're constantly going to be striving in things that matter. And for things that don't matter, you take a little bit of a breather. Nothing's going to happen if the car is not the very, very, very best. The world ain't going to change if you didn't get that extra package. But my friends, if we push ourselves to be great, we will undoubtedly be so. May Hashem bless us to always see our lives with the truest lens. Baruch Adonai